My name is Robert Hansen. I am 70 years old, and if you're listening to me now, it's because I need to tell you about something that broke my soul in two. A betrayal so cruel that even now, when I close my eyes, I feel my heart clench into a tight fist. My own nephew, the son of my dear brother, was planning to get rid of me as if I were some old dog. And his wife, that woman I welcomed like a daughter into my Georgia estate, turned out to be a viper in a wedding dress. It was February, my friend. One of those late afternoons when the air smells of ripe coffee and the red earth of Georgia turns golden with the last rays of the sun. I had just finished my daily round of the coffee groves, something I have done religiously for 40 years. Walking among the plants, touching the beans, talking with the workers. Mr. Johnson had told me that this year's harvest would be exceptional, that the beans had that perfect cherry red color, which means money in the bank. I was returning to the main house along the stone path I built when I married my solace. May she rest in peace. My old leather boots creaked on the dry mango leaves that carpeted the path. The twilight painted the Appalachian Mountains orange. And I was thinking how lucky I was to have family again in this house, which had been so silent after my wife's death. It was then I saw the light on in my study windows. That warm, yellow light filtering through the cotton curtains that Constance had embroidered with bougainvillea flowers. It surprised me because I always turn off all the lights before going out to the groves. I thought maybe Paul was checking the accounting books. After all, I had taught him everything about the coffee business, from how to read international prices to how to calculate export costs. I approached by the side hallway, the one with the carved stone columns we brought from an abandoned estate in Charleston, South Carolina. My steps were silent on the tile floor. A habit I developed over so many years of waking up early without waking Constance. When I got near the study door, I heard voices. Angelica's voice, clear and cold as ice. This estate is worth a minimum of $25 million, Paul. The coffee plantation generates $3 million in clean profit annually. Your uncle is a golden goose who doesn't know what he has. If you tell me you've ever felt the blood freeze in your veins, then you know what happened to me at that moment. But if you haven't lived it, let me explain. It's like someone drives an ice knife directly into your chest and slowly twists it toward your heart. Paul's voice. The boy I raised as my son after the river took my brother and his wife in Memphis, answered with a coldness I had never heard from him. I know, honey. Attorney Miller told me that if Uncle signs a power of attorney, I can control everything. Then we'll find a way to put him in the Sunshine Meadows assisted living facility in Atlanta. For $20,000 monthly, they'll take him in without a problem. Friend, if you've ever raised a child, if you've taught him to walk, to read, to be a man, then you know what it means to hear those words coming out of his mouth. It's like a piece of your soul is being ripped out with rusty pliers. Angelica continued, and her voice sounded excited, like when a woman talks about going shopping. I already found a buyer for the estate. An American hotel chain is willing to pay $30 million. We'll finally live like rich people, not like farmhands. My hands began to tremble. I leaned against the adobe wall, feeling the cold stones through my cotton shirt. My legs shook like those of a newborn calf. The Georgia air, always so clean and fresh, suddenly tasted bitter, like burned coffee. Do you know what hurts more than betrayal, my friend? It's remembering the tenderness. Just a few hours earlier, we had eaten dinner together in the large dining room, under the portrait of my late Constance. Angelica had prepared roast turkey and mashed potatoes, the kind I taught her using my grandmother's secret recipe. With 23 different ingredients, she had kissed me on the cheek with those soft lips, saying, "Thanks for everything, dear uncle." and I had thought how fortunate I was to have such an affectionate niece-in-law. Paul had poured me bourbon from the special bottle we keep for important occasions. That craft bourbon from Kentucky, which costs $800 and tastes like hickory smoke. He had told me about his plans to improve the irrigation system of the coffee groves. And I had listened proudly, thinking that the family business was in good hands. But there, pressed against the wall of my own study, listening to them plan how to get rid of me, I understood that all that tenderness had been theater, a cruel performance to keep me trusting while they prepared their blow. "The old man is getting slower and slower," Paul said, and those words pierced me like bullets. Yesterday, he took 2 hours to check the numbers that he used to check in 30 minutes. It's the perfect time to act. Angelica laughed, a sharp laugh like the hoot of the owls that annoy you at night. Poor thing. He won't even realize it. At the assisted living facility, he'll have his television, his medicine, other old people to play dominoes with. He'll be happier than here, carrying the responsibility of all this, she finished. Friend. At that moment, I felt something break inside me. It wasn't just my heart. It was something deeper, as if my faith in humanity had been shattered. This boy had cried in my arms when his parents died. I had paid for his college, $400,000 over 4 years. I had taught him everything I knew about coffee, the secrets my father taught me, and that his father taught him. I had gotten up with him every morning for 2 years to show him how to distinguish the ripe bean from the green, how to know when the cherry is at its exact point of sweetness. I had patiently explained the cycles of rain and drought, how to read the signs of the sky to know when to plant and when to harvest. And Angelica, that beautiful girl from San Francisco, with her black eyes like obsidian and her smile that lit up the whole estate. I had welcomed her like the daughter I never had. I had blessed them in the estate's chapel. I had paid $50,000 for the best jazz band to make their wedding perfect. And what if the old man doesn't want to sign the papers? Angelica asked. Paul's answer chilled my blood. Then we'll have to be more creative. Dr. Smith says that, at his age, a strong emotional shock could cause a heart attack. It would be a natural death. Very convenient. Do you understand what it means to hear your own nephew? The blood of your blood. Talking about your death as if it were an accounting problem? It's like being buried alive, but you can still hear the dirt being shoveled onto the casket. I managed to move away from the door without a sound, walking silently down the hall until I reached my bedroom. There, in the darkness that smelled of old wood and the gardenia perfume Constance used, I sat on the bed where I had slept for 30 years of happy marriage. On the wall, illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the window, was the photograph of my brother Frank, Paul's father. It was taken a week before he got married. Dressed in his best white linen suit, smiling with that honest smile I thought I saw in his son. Frank had been a man of his word, one of those who would rather die than betray family. I stayed sitting there, friend, with that photograph watching me from the wall. And I cried for the first time since Constance's funeral. I cried for the lost innocence, for the family I thought I had, which turned out to be a lie, for the years of love and effort that had become a gilded cage. But while the tears rolled down my wrinkled cheeks, while I felt the weight of 70 years on my shoulders like a load of wet coffee, something began to grow inside me. It wasn't rage. It was something colder, more calculated. It was the determination of an old man who had worked his whole life under the Georgia sun and was not going to let himself be destroyed by a couple of vipers with the face of family. That night, under the silent gaze of my dead brother, I decided that if they wanted to play dirty, I was going to teach them how to play when you have 70 years of experience and nothing to lose. But to understand why those words hurt me so much, friend, you need to know the full story. You need to know how much love I poured into that boy. How many years of my life I gave him as if he were my own flesh and blood. When my Constance died 6 years ago, this estate became a cemetery of memories. Have you ever lived in a house where every corner whispers the name of the one who is no longer there? The large dining room with its mahogany table for 12 became a desert, where I ate dinner alone, looking at the empty chair where she sat every night for 30 years. Her place was always there, with the embroidered cotton placemat that I never dared to remove. Mornings were the worst, friend. I would wake up at dawn, a lifelong habit, and for a second I would forget that I was alone. I would reach out to her side of the bed, searching for the warmth of her small body, and find only cold sheets. The silence in this house was so heavy that I could hear my own breathing bouncing off the adobe walls. The plantation workers looked at me with that respectful pity that people reserve for old widowers. Mr. Johnson, my foreman, tried to cheer me up by telling me jokes while we checked the coffee groves. But I could see in his eyes that he worried about me. "Mr. Hanson," he would say, "this house needs laughter again. It's too silent for a man like you." It was 2 years like that, friend. 2 years walking alone among the coffee plants, eating alone at that enormous table, sleeping alone in a bed that suddenly seemed the size of a football field. Sundays were especially cruel. Constance and I always went to 8 o'clock Mass at St. Robert's Church in town. And afterward, she would prepare barbecued pork that we would eat on the porch while listening to the birds sing in the orange trees. But God has mysterious ways of filling the voids in our hearts, doesn't he? In September of 2018, the heaviest rains Tennessee had seen in 20 years arrived. The Mississippi River overflowed like a hungry giant snake, swallowing entire towns in Memphis. My brother Frank and his wife Carol lived near the river, in a small adobe house he had built with his own hands. The news reached me by phone at 6 o'clock in the morning. The broken voice of the Memphis mayor told me that they had found Frank's house completely destroyed, that the waters had taken everything. "Mr. Hanson," he said, "your brother and sister-in-law couldn't get out in time. But the boy Paul survived. He is in the hospital, injured but alive." I drove the 4 hours to Memphis in my old Ford truck, my heart pounding like a drum at a town fair. The roads were full of mud and debris, fallen trees blocking the way, families carrying their few belongings in burlap sacks. The smell of death and rotten water filled the air like cursed incense. When I arrived at the hospital, I found Paul in a rusty iron bed, with his left arm in a cast, and cuts on his face that would leave scars for life. But what broke my heart the most was seeing him cry like a 5-year-old child, with those sobs that come from the soul when you lose everything you love all at once. "Uncle," he said when he saw me come in, and his voice sounded like broken glass. "Dad and Mom, the water took them. I tried to help them, but the current was too strong. I couldn't save them, Uncle. I couldn't do anything." I hugged him right there, friend, not caring that my shirt got wet with his tears. He was a 25-year-old boy, tall and strong like all the men in our family. But at that moment, he was just an orphan who needed to feel that he still had family in this cruel world. "My son," I told him, using the word that Constance always used for him when he was a child, "you will never be alone as long as I live. This house is your house. This family is your family. Your father was my soul brother, and you are my heart's son." He came with me to the estate that same week. He arrived with a small cardboard suitcase that contained everything left of his previous life. 3 changes of clothes, a photograph of his parents at their wedding, and the Bible his mother read every night before sleeping. That was all he had saved from the flood. I gave him the room that had been Constance's sewing room, the one with a window to the gardenia garden and a view of the mountains. We bought a new bed at Macy's in downtown Atlanta, a pine wood dresser, a desk where he could study. I spent $12,000 furnishing his room, but every dollar was worth it when I saw his face light up the first night he slept in his own bed after the tragedy. But Paul needed more than a bed and a roof, friend. He needed a future, a profession, a reason to get up every morning. He had studied agronomy for 2 years at a technical school in Memphis before the flood. But he had never finished the degree because he had to help his father on the family farm. "My son," I told him one afternoon as we walked among the coffee groves, "you are going to finish your studies. You are going to be an agricultural engineer. And you are going to learn everything about coffee so that one day you can manage this plantation better than me." His eyes filled with tears again. But this time they were tears of gratitude, not pain. "Uncle," he replied, "I don't have money for college. Everything was lost in the flood." "Money shouldn't worry you, boy. That's what family is for." I enrolled him in the University of Georgia, in Athens, in the agricultural engineering program. It cost me $400,000 in total over 4 years, $100,000 annually for tuition, plus the cost of books, transport, food, and lodging. It was money I had saved working since I was 15, dollar upon dollar, sweat upon sweat. But every dollar I invested in his education, I considered the best investment of my life. The first months were difficult for him. He got up at 5 o'clock in the morning with me to check the coffee groves before going to the university. He returned in the afternoon tired and with his head full of chemical formulas and theories about soils. But little by little I saw him blossom. How he recovered the desire to live. I taught him what I knew about the art of coffee, friend. Knowledge that my grandfather passed on to my father, that my father passed on to me, and that I was now passing on to him as if it were a sacred inheritance. I showed him how to read the plant leaves to know if they needed more nitrogen or if they were suffering from lack of water. "Look, son," I would tell him as we walked among the rows of coffee plants at dawn, when the dew still shone like diamonds on the green leaves. "Coffee is like a beautiful woman. You have to treat it with affection, with patience, with respect. You can't rush it or mistreat it, because then it turns bitter." I taught him the secret of fermentation that we had kept in our family for 3 generations. How to leave the beans in the concrete tanks for exactly 48 hours. No more, no less. How to know by the smell when the fermentation is perfect. That sweet and slightly acidic aroma, which means that the sugars are transforming correctly. Our family's coffee, I would explain as we stirred the beans with wooden shovels that I had carved myself. It's famous throughout Georgia because we've never used artificial chemicals. Your great-grandfather said that the earth is like a mother's womb. If you poison it with chemicals, the children are born sick. In the afternoons, after he returned from the university, we would sit on the main porch with 2 cups of our best coffee, and he would tell me what he had learned. His eyes sparkled when he spoke to me about new organic farming techniques, about international markets, about how we could export our coffee to Europe and the United States. "Uncle," he would say with that excitement that only young people have when they discover their vocation, "Professor Adams says our coffee has export quality. We could triple the profits if we get organic certification." And I would listen proudly, friend, feeling this house fill with life again, with projects, with a future. Paul had brought something that I thought was lost forever after Constance's death. Hope. when he graduated 3 years ago. It was the proudest day of my life since my wedding. I was in the front row of the university auditorium, dressed in my best suit, the same one I wore to get married, watching my boy walk across the stage to receive his degree. I cried shamelessly, friend, thinking of Frank and Carol, wishing they had been there to see their son become a professional. After the graduation, I took him to dinner at the best restaurant in Atlanta, the Mansion, where we ordered fried shrimp and coleslaw, and we drank an entire bottle of California Cabernet, which cost $800. Son, I told him, raising my glass, today, you didn't just graduate. Today, your father and mother graduated too, and they are watching you from heaven. But true happiness came when he met Angelica at a coffee fair in Raleigh, North Carolina. She worked as a secretary in a producer's cooperative. A pretty girl of 23 with hair black as night and eyes that sparkled like stars when she laughed. She came from a humble but decent family, daughter of a rural teacher and a traditional midwife. The first time he brought her to the estate, I was pruning Constance's rose bushes in the main garden. When I saw them walk together along the stone path, holding hands like lovebirds in spring, I felt my heart fill with a joy I thought I would never feel again. Uncle, Paul said to me with that smile that lit up his entire face, I want to introduce you to Angelica. She is the most wonderful woman in the world. And she, with that sweet shyness that well-raised girls have, gave me a small curtsy and said, Nice to meet you, Mr. Hansen. Paul has told me so much about you that I feel like I already know you. From the first day, I treated her like the daughter I never had. I taught her Constance's secret recipes for turkey dressing and apple pie. I showed her the spice garden where my wife grew cilantro, basil, sage, and jalapeno peppers. I gave her the silk shawl that Constance used to wear to Mass on Sundays, the one we had bought at the craft market in Santa Fe, New Mexico, during our honeymoon. When Paul asked my permission to marry her, I already had everything planned. Son, I told him, this estate needs a wedding like it hasn't had in years. We are going to have a party that will be remembered throughout Georgia. I hired the best jazz band from New Orleans, the Alligators of the South, for $50,000 to play at the ceremony and the party. I ordered bougainvillea flowers of 3 different colors, red, pink, and white, from the nurseries in Savannah to decorate the small chapel at the north end of the estate, the one my grandfather built in 1920 to give thanks for an exceptional harvest. The ceremony was on a Sunday morning, when the sun is still soft and the air smells of freshly roasted coffee. Angelica walked down the chapel aisle dressed in the wedding gown we had custom made by the best seamstress in Atlanta, Mrs. Davis, who charged $15,000 but created a work of art with lace from New York and pearls from the Gulf Coast. When I saw Paul waiting at the altar, dressed in his new white linen suit, as handsome and elegant as his father had been on his wedding day, I couldn't hold back the tears. And when Angelica reached him, radiant with happiness, with that smile that could illuminate the entire estate, I thought that life was finally rewarding me for so much pain. After the religious ceremony, we held the party in the main courtyard, under the lights we hung among the mango and orange trees. We butchered 2 goats and a pig for the barbecue. We prepared chili with corn from our own harvest, sweet and savory biscuits, fresh lemonade and iced tea. The jazz music filled the tropical night, while the guests danced on the tile floor that shone under the full moon. I danced with Angelica that night, friend. A slow dance that reminded me of the times when I danced with Constance at the town festivals. Thank you for everything, dear uncle, she whispered in my ear as we moved to the rhythm of the music. Thank you for giving me such a beautiful family. And now, sitting on my bed after hearing her betrayal, those words sounded like cruel mockery. All that tenderness, all that gratitude, had been a lie. Or maybe it had been real at the time. But greed had poisoned it like acid on metal. Do you understand now why it hurt me so much to hear those plans, friend? It wasn't just that they wanted to steal my money or my land. It was that they had turned years of genuine love, of true sacrifice, of sincere hope, into an investment they expected to cash in with interest. Every dollar I spent on Paul's education, every morning I spent teaching him the secrets of coffee, every night I consoled him when he missed his parents, every moment of happiness we shared during their wedding. All of that had been misinterpreted by them as senile weakness, as the foolish generosity of an old man they could manipulate. But they were wrong, friend. They were very wrong to think that 70 years of life had made me stupid. That February night, when I returned to my bedroom after hearing the betrayal, I didn't sleep for a minute. I stayed sitting on the edge of the bed until Mr. Johnson's rooster crowed the sunrise, looking at the photograph of my brother Frank and feeling the rage slowly simmer in my chest, like beans in a clay pot. But it wasn't blind rage, friend. It was something more dangerous. A cold, calculated rage. Like the one a bobcat must feel when stalking its prey. Because if 70 years of life in Georgia had taught me anything, it's that revenge served hot evaporates quickly. But revenge served cold can last a lifetime. The next day, I began my own plan, step by step. Like someone building an adobe house brick by brick. The first thing I needed was evidence, proof of what they had said. Because it's one thing to overhear a conversation by chance, and quite another to be able to prove the betrayal to a judge. That same week, I drove to Atlanta with the excuse of buying medicine for my blood pressure. But instead of going to CVS as always, I headed to the electronics market on Main Street. There, among stalls selling used televisions and old radios, I found what I was looking for. A small, silent Sony cassette recorder, one of those that students use to record classes. "What do you want it for, Don?" the seller asked me. A young boy wearing a Georgia Bulldogs t-shirt. "To record my life stories before I forget them." I lied to him with the smile of an innocent grandfather. I'm old now, and my memories are starting to fade. It cost me $3,000, money I took from the safe I keep hidden behind the portrait of the Virgin Mary in my bedroom. I also bought a box of blank 90-minute cassettes, enough to record all the betrayals that might be necessary. Over the following weeks, I developed a routine that would have made any detective proud of the movies I watched with Constance on Sundays. Every time I heard voices in my study at night, I would hide in the pantry next door. That's where we keep the sacks of coffee and the farm tools. Have you ever tried to stay absolutely still for an hour, friend? While your heart is beating so hard you're afraid they'll discover you by the noise? I would hide there among the sacks of green coffee with the recorder in my hand, trying to control my breathing while they planned my destruction in the next room. The second recording was the most revealing. It was a Tuesday night, in late March, when the air still had that dry cold that comes before the rains. Angelica had cooked chili for dinner, chili with the corn we grew ourselves, and afterward they went to the study, supposedly to check the accounting books. But what they were checking wasn't coffee numbers. It was the numbers of their betrayal. "I spoke with Robert Miller of Paradise Resorts again," I heard Angelica say, and her voice sounded excited, like a child with a new toy. "He says they can close the purchase in 60 days. Once we have the power of attorney. $30 million cash, friend. Can you imagine?" "And what about me?" Paul asked. "How do I make sure you don't leave me out of the deal?" Angelica's laugh sounded like broken glass. "Oh, Paul, do you really think I'm going to stay with you when I have $15 million in the bank? I already have my own plans. Friend, At that moment, I felt my blood run cold. They weren't just betraying me. She was planning to betray Paul, too. She was a viper biting everywhere, without distinguishing between enemy and ally. Robert offered me a $2 million commission if I handle the entire negotiation, she continued. With that money, I'm going to live in Miami Beach. You stay here playing administrator while I enjoy the life I deserve. That night, I recorded 40 minutes of conversation. And every word was like a stab in the heart, but it was also pure gold for my revenge. Because it's one thing to steal from a foolish old man and quite another to steal among thieves. By May, I had enough recorded evidence, but I needed more information. I needed to know exactly how they planned to execute their plan, who else was involved, what all the details of their betrayal were. For that, I needed professional help. I found Attorney Johnson through Mr. Clark, who runs the hardware store in town. Mr. Hansen, he told me when I asked if he knew a discreet private investigator. My brother-in-law works with an attorney in Atlanta who specializes in sensitive matters. They say he's very good and very quiet. Attorney Johnson had his office in an old building near the Central Park, on a second floor that smelled of old coffee and yellowed papers. He was a skinny man about 50 years old, with a bristly mustache and eyes that saw too much. When I explained my situation without giving many details, he just nodded as if he had heard that story 1,000 times before. Mr. Hansen, he said, lighting a cigarette. Family cases are the most complicated because they hurt the most. But they are also the easiest to investigate because trusting people make many mistakes. I paid him $25,000 in advance, money I had been saving to repair the roof of the main house. But I decided it was better to have leaks in the roof than vipers in the family. For 3 months, Attorney Johnson followed Angelica like a silent shadow. His reports arrived every week by mail, in manila envelopes without a return address that I read in the privacy of my bedroom, by the light of the kerosene lamp that I used when I didn't want to arouse suspicion by turning on the electric light. The first report broke my heart, but confirmed my suspicions. Female subject met 3 times this week with individual identified as Robert Miller, representative of Paradise Resorts International at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. The meetings lasted between 2 and 3 hours each. Intimate behavior was observed between both subjects. The following reports were worse. Angelica wasn't just planning to sell my estate. She was planning to run off with the American, taking her $2 million commission and leaving Paul empty-handed. She had found love in the arms of a wealthy American, and we were just the stepping stones she intended to use to climb to that new life. Female subject has opened a bank account at Bank of America in her own name, another report stated. It is confirmed that she has been transferring small amounts of money from the estate's commercial accounts, total estimated $150,000 in 6 months. Do you understand what it means to discover that someone you love, like a daughter, has been stealing from you for months? Dollar by dollar. Like an ant carrying sugar grain by grain. It's like realizing that your own blood is poisoned. But what hurt me the most was the August report. Female subject commented to the American that the old man is becoming more senile every day, and it will be easy to convince him to sign any paper. She also mentioned that they have considered accelerating the process through more direct methods if the subject refuses to cooperate. More direct methods. The same words I had heard that first night in February. They didn't just want to rob me. They were willing to kill me if necessary. During those months of investigation, I continued acting like the good and generous uncle I had always been. I served them coffee in the mornings. I asked about their plans for the day. I listened with apparent interest when Paul told me about the improvements he wanted to make to the plantation. At night, we ate dinner together as a happy family, and I blessed them before every meal, as Constance had taught me. But inside, friend, It was as if I were living with two strangers, wearing masks of familiar people. Every smile from Angelica reminded me of her laugh when she planned to abandon Paul. Every hug from my nephew reminded me of how he had spoken of my death, as if it were a business transaction. Nights were the worst. I stayed awake very late, sitting on the main porch, looking at the stars over the Georgia mountains, talking to the ghost of my Constance. "What would you do, my love?" I would ask the night wind that moved the coffee leaves. "How would you punish this betrayal without becoming the same as them?" And the answer always came to me with the breeze that smelled of orange blossoms. True justice is not returning evil for evil, but using good to disarm malice. By July, I knew clearly what I had to do. It wasn't enough to kick them off the estate or disinherit them. That would have been simple revenge. And simple revenge doesn't teach anything. I needed a lesson that would be remembered, something that would show them the true value of what they had tried to steal. It was then that I decided to make the most important trip of my life since Constance's funeral. On a Friday in August, I told Paul that I had to go to Atlanta for some medical exams that Dr. Peterson had ordered for me. It was a lie, of course, but a necessary lie to save the truth. I drove my old Ford truck along the winding road that crosses the Georgia mountains, the one that passes through small towns where time seems to have stopped 50 years ago. The trip took me 3 hours because my truck is no longer young, just like me. But I arrived at the state capitol with my heart full of determination. Attorney Green's office was on Main Street, in a modern glass and concrete building that contrasted with the colonial constructions of the historic center. He was one of the most respected lawyers in the state, specializing in family and probate law. With 40 years of experience helping wealthy Georgia families solve their most complicated problems. "Mr. Hansen," he said to me when I entered his office, which had a panoramic view of the state capitol, "it is an honor to meet you. I have heard a lot about your estate and the exceptional quality of your coffee." He was an elegant man in his 60s, dressed in a gray suit and a navy blue tie, who spoke with the precision of someone who has spent decades unraveling human lies. I explained my situation to him in detail. I showed him the recordings, the detectives' reports, all the evidence I had accumulated over months. "I perfectly understand your pain, Mr. Hansen," he told me after listening to everything without interrupting me once. "But I also understand your wisdom. You don't just want to punish. You want to build something positive out of this betrayal." We spent 4 hours discussing the legal details of what I had in mind. A completely new will that would turn my estate into something bigger than a simple family property. A legacy that would honor Constance's memory and give hope to the working families who had been loyal for decades. Georgia law, Attorney Green explained to me while we reviewed legal codes as thick as Bibles, allows the creation of farmer cooperatives and educational foundations. Your property can be legally transferred to these institutions, especially if there is evidence that the natural heirs have acted against the interests of the testator. The plan we designed that afternoon was more beautiful than any revenge I could have imagined. The 300-acre estate, valued at $25 million, would be transferred entirely to a cooperative formed by the 15 families who had worked with me for years. They would know how to take care of the land because they loved it. They knew it. They had sweated over it generation after generation. The coffee plantation and the entire business, which generated $3 million annually, would become the heart of the Constance Hansen Educational Foundation, dedicated to giving scholarships and building schools for Georgia farm children, the children who grew up as I had grown up, barefoot and hungry, but full of dreams. "And the main house?" the attorney asked me. "For Mr. Johnson," I replied without hesitation. "He has worked with me for 40 years. For 40 years, he has been more a brother than an employee. He deserves to die in a house of his own, not in an adobe room like all the farm workers." Attorney Green's fees were $50,000. But they included all the paperwork before the state government, the notarial registrations, the legal creation of the cooperative, and the foundation. It was money well invested in justice. But the most important part was still missing. Talking to Mr. Johnson and the workers. Because I couldn't give them a surprise like that without preparing them, without making sure they understood the responsibility I was giving them. The meeting was on a Sunday afternoon, after Mass in town. I summoned Mr. Johnson to the main porch of the house, the one where Constance and I used to drink coffee while watching the sunset over the mountains. I explained everything to him, Paul and Angelica's betrayal, my plan for constructive revenge, what it would mean for him and for the working families. Mr. Johnson cried, "Friend." He cried like a child losing his mother when I told him the estate would be his and his companions. "Mr. Hansen," he said with a voice broken by emotion, "we don't know how to handle bank papers. We don't know about contracts or exports. That's why you're going to have help," I explained. "The foundation will hire honest administrators, certified accountants, agricultural engineers to advise you. But the land will be yours. The decisions will be yours. The profits will be yours." That night, I called a meeting with all the working families in the main courtyard. Under the light of the bulbs, we hung among the mango trees. 15 families, 62 people, counting children and grandparents, all sitting on plastic chairs and wooden benches, looking at me with that mixture of curiosity and respect that farm workers reserve for bosses who have treated them well. I explained the plan to them with simple words, without legal complications that could confuse them. I told them that they were going to become owners of the land they had worked all their lives, that their children would be able to study thanks to the foundation's scholarships, that no one could ever again kick them out of their homes or lower their wages at the boss's whim. The women cried. The men took off their straw hats and crossed themselves as if they had seen a miracle. The children ran between the chairs, shouting with joy, not fully understanding what was happening, but feeling their parents' happiness. "Mrs. Johnson," Mr. Johnson's wife told me, "why are you doing this for us? We are simple people. We don't have an education. We don't have money to pay you." "Mrs. Johnson," I replied, "you have already paid me with 40 years of honest work, of loyalty, of respect. You have never stolen a single coffee bean from me. You have never lied to me. You have never planned to harm me. That is worth more than all the money in the world." By September, everything was ready. The documents signed and registered. The cooperative legally constituted. The foundation established with its board of directors. Only the perfect moment to execute my plan was missing. The moment that would show Paul and Angelica that they had greatly underestimated the old man they thought they could manipulate. And then, their invitation arrived to celebrate my forced retirement on Valentine's Day. The perfect date to serve my cold revenge on a silver platter, decorated with the flowers of their own arrogance. February 14th arrived like a slap disguised as a caress, "Friend." Valentine's Day, the day of love, turned by them into the day of my symbolic funeral. The irony was so cruel that it almost made me laugh. If it weren't for the fact that my heart weighed like a grinding stone when I saw the preparations they had been secretly making for a week. I woke up that morning to Mr. Johnson's rooster crowing, as on every morning of my life. But something in the air felt different. It was that smell of betrayal that mixes with the aroma of coffee and turns it bitter. From my window, I could see the workers hanging colored lights among the mango trees in the main courtyard, led by Paul, who gesticulated like an orchestra conductor, directing his symphony of deceptions. "Good morning, dear uncle," Angelica greeted me when I went down for breakfast, and her smile shone falser than a chocolate coin. She was wearing her yellow dress, the one I had given her for her birthday the previous year, and she moved through the kitchen like a butterfly fluttering over carrion. "We hope you are ready for your special day," she said. "My special day?" I asked, feigning the confusion of an old man who doesn't understand what's going on around him. I knew perfectly well what was coming, but I needed to play my part until the end. "Your retirement party, Uncle," Paul interjected, patting me on the back with that familiarity that now made me nauseous. "Finally, you can rest after so many years of hard work. We will take care of everything." During the morning, I watched them work like busy little ants, building their anthill of lies. They had hired the jazz band, the Alligators of the South, for $15,000. Money that came from the estate's accounts, of course. The musicians arrived in an old truck loaded with their polished wooden instruments. Those giant xylophones that sound like rain falling on dry leaves. The band leader, a skinny man with a revolutionary mustache, greeted Paul as if they were old friends. "Mr. Paul, we have the blues songs you asked for ready, and also the birthday song for the honoree." Honoree? The word sounded like a nail in a coffin. At noon, Mr. Perry, the town butcher, arrived, dragging a whole hog, already gutted and ready to roast, in his truck. 50 pounds of meat that had cost $8,000. As I overheard Angelica paying him with bills she took from her purse, as if they had always been hers. The animal was hung on the rotisserie they had improvised near the exterior kitchen, where we normally prepared food for the workers during harvest season. "It's going to be delicious, Mrs. Angelica," Mr. Perry told her as he lit the charcoal, which would soon fill the air with aromatic smoke. "With this meat and the rub you prepared, they will remember this party for years." For years, yes, but not for the reasons they expected. During the afternoon, the guests they had invited without consulting me continued to arrive. Half the town of St. Robert showed up as if they had announced at Sunday Mass that there would be free food and live music. Entire families with children running among the folding tables they had rented from the party supply house, the Paradise, for $3,000. But what hurt me the most was seeing the banner they hung between the mango trees. The ones I planted with my own hands when I married Constance. "Forced retirement of the boss," the red letters on a white background read. As if it were the announcement of a public execution disguised as a celebration. Forced retirement. They didn't even bother to hide their intentions. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the cake Angelica had ordered from Sweet Mary's Bakery in downtown Atlanta arrived. It was transported in a special box. Two girls who looked nervous about handling something so elaborate. When they unwrapped it on the main table, my heart almost leaped out of my mouth. It was a cake shaped like a giant coffee bean, covered in brown fondant that shone under the colored lights. But what pierced me like a bullet was the inscription in white chocolate letters. "Goodbye, old man. Hello, new era." It had cost $2,000, according to the invoice I saw sticking out of Angelica's purse. $2,000 to celebrate my death in life. "Do you like it, Uncle?" Angelica asked me with that smile I now knew was pure bottled venom. I thought it would be appropriate to make it in the shape of a coffee bean, since your whole life has revolved around those little beans. "It's very pretty, dear," I replied, and every word cost me as if my mouth were full of crushed glass. "It's clear you put a lot of thought into it." Thought. If I had known what that word meant to her, I would have choked on my own tongue. The party officially began when the sun began to hide behind the mountains, painting the Georgia sky with those colors that only God knows how to mix. Orange, pink, purple, as if it were the last sunset I would see as the owner of this land. The musicians attacked with a lively tune, while the guests served themselves chili that the town ladies had prepared with corn from our own harvest. They seated me in a special chair, decorated with tissue paper flowers, as if I were the king of a kingdom about to abdicate. From there, I watched the guests enjoy the food paid for with my money, the music hired with my dollars, celebrating my own financial funeral, while I smiled like a wooden saint. "Attention! Attention!" shouted James Cooper, Paul's friend who worked at the local bank in Savannah. A portly man in his 40s who always smelled of cheap cologne and expensive ambition. He climbed onto a folding chair with a glass of Jack Daniels in his hand. The good whiskey, $150 a bottle. "We are gathered here," he began his speech in the voice of a campaigning politician, "to honor Mr. Robert Hansen, who after 50 years of hard work can finally rest, while the new generations lead this family business into the 21st century." The applause sounded like rain on a tin roof, and I applauded too, as if I were grateful for my own execution. James continued talking about the wisdom of knowing when to pass the baton, and how young people have fresh ideas that can revolutionize the coffee business. Fresh ideas, like selling the estate to an American hotel chain. "To Mr. Hansen," he shouted, raising his glass, "may life give him all the peace he deserves in his retirement." "To Mr. Hansen," the guests chanted, and the toast echoed throughout the courtyard like bells tolling for the dead. Then came the individual speeches. Every person who had received some favor from me over the years approached the makeshift microphone to tell nice anecdotes and thank me for my generosity and leadership. It was as if they were at my wake, but I was still breathing, listening to my own funeral eulogies while they planned to bury me alive. Mrs. Peterson, who ran the town store, told how I had loaned her money without interest when her husband got sick with diabetes. "Mr. Hansen has always had a heart bigger than his wallet," she said. And I thought of the irony of her words, while Angelica smiled like the cat that ate the canary. Mr. Clark, from the hardware store, recalled how I had helped build the town's elementary school by donating 2,000 sacks of cement. "A man who thinks of the children," he declared. "He deserves to be remembered by the children forever." The children will remember me, yes? But not as he imagined. When the speeches ended and the jazz band began to play again, a lively ragtime that made the couples dance on the tiles that shone under the colored lights, Angelica approached my chair with a brown leather folder under her arm. "Dear Uncle," she said with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted something. "Taking advantage of the fact that we are all gathered, Paul and I thought it would be a good idea to formalize some papers. Nothing complicated, just documents so he can more easily handle the estate's affairs while you enjoy your well-deserved rest." "What kind of paper is it, dear?" I asked, feigning the innocent curiosity of a grandfather who trusts his family. "A simple power of attorney," Paul intervened, approaching with the notary they had brought from Atlanta. A skinny man with glasses who seemed uncomfortable being there. "Just so I can sign export contracts, manage the bank accounts, those administrative things that bore you." Things that bore me. As if caring for a lifetime's patrimony was boring. They spread the documents on a side table they had covered with a white tablecloth, as if it were an altar of sacrifice. The small letters danced under the yellow light of the bulbs, but I didn't need to read them to know what they said. It was my financial death sentence written on bond paper and ready for my suicidal signature. "Look, Uncle," Angelica explained, pointing to specific paragraphs with her red-painted fingernail. "It says here that you keep ownership of everything. But Paul can make operational decisions. It's like giving him the car keys, but keeping the title." Masterful liar. The document in front of me gave him absolute control over everything. Bank accounts, commercial contracts, sales decisions, even the authority to institutionalize me in a geriatric facility if he considered my mental health compromised. I took the pen the notary offered me, a silver cross pen that shone like a knife under the light. The guests had gathered around the table, forming a circle of witnesses for my own betrayal. Some were recording with their cell phones, creating the audio-visual record of my supposed senile generosity. "Thank you, kids," I said with a trembling voice that I didn't have to fake, "for taking care of this old man who no longer understands much about modern numbers and contracts." The pen trembled in my hand as I signed each page, each signature transferring control of my life to the vipers I had raised thinking they were family. I signed the first page, then the second, then the third. Each signature was like driving one more nail into my own financial coffin. Angelica hugged me when I finished signing, and her gardenia perfume, the same one Constance used, turned my stomach as if I had eaten rotten meat. "Thank you for trusting us, dear uncle. You won't regret it." I wouldn't regret it. In that, she was right, although not for the reasons she thought. Paul shook my hand with that firmness that I had taught him when he was young. Look and learn how a man should shake hands. Now he was using my own teaching to seal my destruction. "Don't worry about anything, Uncle. Everything will be in the best hands." The best hands. The hands that had planned to put me in a facility for $20,000 a month. The notary put the documents in his leather briefcase, as if they were gold bars, which in a way they were. Gold transmuted into legal paper that turned my decades of work into the patrimony of two traders disguised as family. "Now, let's cut the cake," James shouted, raising another glass of whiskey. "The honoree should have the honor." They led me to the main table where the coffee bean-shaped cake rested, that sweet mockery of my entire life. They put a large knife in my hands, one of those that Constance used to cut the Thanksgiving turkey, and everyone gathered around shouting, "Photo! Photo!" as if it were a historic moment worthy of being remembered. Camera flashes illuminated my face as I cut the first piece of my own gastronomic funeral. The cake was filled with coffee cream, irony upon irony, and it tasted exactly like my own bitterness. "Goodbye, old man," someone shouted, reading the cake's inscription, and everyone laughed as if it were the funniest joke in the world. Oh, the new era. A new era, yes, but not the one they expected. The pieces of cake were distributed among the guests as if it were a perverse communion, every bite celebrating my supposed senility. I ate my piece slowly, savoring the irony of how the sugar letters dissolved in my mouth while I planned my resurrection. It was almost 9 o'clock at night when the full moon shone over the Georgia mountains like the eye of God observing human betrayal, when I heard the car engine approaching on the gravel road. The headlights cut through the darkness like lightsabers, and I felt my heart race for the first time all day. My moment had arrived. The car stopped near the main courtyard, and two men in formal suits got out, dramatically contrasting with the festive atmosphere of the party. Attorney Green walked ahead, carrying a black leather briefcase, followed by a younger man with an official folder that shone with the golden seal of the state of Georgia government. "Good evening," Attorney Green announced, his voice cutting through the conversations like a machete through cane. "Excuse the interruption, but we need to speak with Mr. Robert Hansen." The jazz music stopped abruptly, like a scratched record getting stuck on the same beat. The guests were left with glasses halfway to their mouths, with pieces of cake frozen on their forks, staring at these two strangers who had come to disturb their celebration. "Who are you?" Paul asked, his voice trying to sound authoritative but coming out shaky. "This is a private family party." "I am Attorney Green, legal representative of Mr. Hansen," my lawyer replied with the professional calm of someone who has handled thousands of similar cases. "And this is Mr. Morris, official notary of the state government. We have urgent documents that require immediate attention." Angelica had turned pale as freshly painted wall plaster. Her black eyes darted quickly between the two men and me, like a cornered animal seeking escape. "Mr. Hansen," she said, her voice betraying her nervousness. "Do you know these gentlemen?" Yes, dear, I replied, getting up from my chair of honor with more firmness than I had shown all night. I know them very well. They have come to resolve some important matters. The governmental notary opened his official folder and took out documents that crackled with the authority of the state seal. "Invited ladies and gentlemen," he announced with a voice that reached the farthest corners of the courtyard. "By order of the state of Georgia government, we need to read aloud the updated will of Mr. Robert Hansen, dated the 15th of August of the current year." Updated will. The words fell upon the party like hail on tender flowers. "That's impossible," Angelica shouted, and her mask of an affectionate niece-in-law finally cracked, revealing the viper that had been hiding beneath. "He just signed a power of attorney. Everything is settled." "The power of attorney," Attorney Green explained with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "is automatically annulled by subsequent testamentary provisions." Mr. Hansen had every right to change his will up to the last moment. Paul had dropped his glass of whiskey, and the liquid spread over the tiles like dark blood. "Uncle," he said in a voice that was a mixture of pleading and threat, "what is happening here?" "What is happening, son?" I replied, feeling my back straighten after months of acting like a defeated old man, "is that you are finally going to learn the true value of what you tried to steal." The notary began to read in a clear voice that cut the night air like a sharp knife. "By this document, I, Robert Hansen, in full possession of my mental faculties and without any coercion, dispose of my assets in the following manner. First disposition. The San Robert Estate, located in the county of Atlanta, Georgia, with an extension of 300 acres and a cadastral value of $25 million, is transferred in its entirety to the Georgia Coffee Workers Cooperative, formed by the 15 families who have labored on this property." A murmur rose among the guests like wind moving dry leaves. The estate workers, who had been serving food and drink throughout the party, looked at each other with wide eyes, unable to believe what they were hearing. Mr. Johnson dropped the tray of glasses he was collecting, and the crash of broken glass against the stones sounded like applause. "Second disposition," the notary continued, raising his voice above the growing murmur. "The coffee plantation, the export business, and all related assets, with an estimated value of $15 million and annual generation of $3 million in profits, are transferred to the Constance Hansen Educational Foundation, dedicated to providing scholarships and building schools for farm children in the state of Georgia." Angelica had begun to tremble like a leaf in a hurricane. "That's impossible," she screamed, her voice cracking like glass. "He can't do that. We are family." Third disposition, the notary continued, unperturbed. The main house of the estate, with all its belongings and furniture, is transferred to Mr. John Johnson in recognition of 40 years of loyal and honest service. Mr. Johnson collapsed onto a chair as if his legs had been cut off. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks as he repeated, "It can't be. It can't be," like a desperate prayer. Fourth and final disposition. The notary raised his voice like a preacher on Easter Sunday. "Paul Hansen is completely excluded from any inheritance due to proven acts of family betrayal and fraudulent conspiracy against the testator." The silence that followed was so heavy that the crackling of the coals that were still roasting the pork could be heard. The night crickets seemed to have quieted out of respect for the drama unfolding beneath the Georgia stars. Paul looked at me as if I were a ghost who had returned from the dead to claim justice. "Uncle," he whispered in the voice of a lost child. "Why?" Instead of answering, I walked to where I had left my secret weapon prepared. The Sony recorder I had bought in Atlanta months ago. I raised it as if it were a holy chalice and pressed the playback button. Angelica's voice filled the night courtyard with crystal clarity. "This estate is worth a minimum of $25 million. The coffee plantation generates $3 million annually in clean profit. Your uncle is a golden goose who doesn't know what he has. The guests looked at each other as if the devil himself had appeared in the middle of the party. The recorded voice continued with blood-chilling coldness. I already found a buyer for the estate. An American hotel chain is willing to pay $30 million. We'll finally live like rich people, not like farm hands. Angelica had lost all color in her face, as if her soul had fled through her mouth. That's false, she stammered, but her voice sounded hollow like a broken drum. But the recording wasn't finished. Paul's voice came out of the machine like a confession from beyond the grave. Attorney Miller told me that if Uncle signs a power of attorney, I can control everything. Then we'll find a way to put him in the Sunshine Meadows Assisted Living Facility in Atlanta. For $20,000 monthly, they'll accept him without a problem. A collective gasp arose among the guests. They were simple farm people who knew the value of one's word and respect for elders, and what they had just heard was blasphemy against everything they considered sacred. "And that's not all," I roared, feeling my blood boil in my veins after months of feigning meekness. I took out the folder that Attorney Johnson had prepared for me with all the collected evidence. Here are the letters that my dear niece-in-law exchanged with her American lover. The pages flew like white butterflies when I tossed them into the air, falling onto the tables where the guests grabbed them with trembling hands. Love letters in poorly translated English, detailed plans for the hotel sale, promises of a new life in Miami Beach, with a $2 million commission. Dear Robert, I read aloud one of the most incriminating letters. How does that sound? As soon as the old man signs the papers, I'll take care of convincing my husband to sell quickly. Your offer of $2 million for my cooperation is still on the table, right? I can't wait to start our life together, away from this dumpy ranch. Paul turned to Angelica with eyes spitting fire. You were going to betray me too, Angelica. Paul, I can explain, she began. But it was already too late. The truth had rushed out like water from a broken dam, and there was no dike that could contain it. Get out! I roared with a voice I hadn't used in decades, a voice that made the leaves on the trees tremble. Get out of my house, both of you! Attorney Green took another document from his briefcase. By order of the family court in Atlanta, you have 48 hours to vacate the property. Any attempt to remain will be considered illegal trespassing. The guests began to move away, like water finding its course, hastily gathering their things and murmuring under their breath about divine justice and the punishment that finds traitors. In 10 minutes, the courtyard that had been full of music and laughter was empty except for us, the executioners, the condemned, and the witnesses of justice. Angelica ran toward the house crying like Mary Magdalene. But her tears no longer moved me to pity. They were tears of frustration, not regret. Tears of someone lamenting the missed opportunity, not the harm caused. Paul remained standing in the middle of the courtyard like a pillar of salt, looking at the scattered documents that revealed his wife's double betrayal. Uncle, he said in a voice that cracked like a dry branch. I didn't know that she... You knew exactly what you were doing, boy, I replied with the sadness of someone burying a son. You planned to put me in the assisted living facility. You talked about more direct methods if I didn't cooperate. Your wife betrayed you just as you betrayed me. But that doesn't make you any less guilty. That night, they slept in the house for the last time. I heard them packing until very late, arguing in poisonous whispers that filtered through the adobe walls like hickory smoke. At dawn the next day, I saw them load their few belongings into cardboard boxes under the silent gaze of the workers, who now knew the whole truth. Justice had arrived dressed for a party, but it was leaving dressed in mourning. And I, for the first time in months, slept soundly, feeling the weight of 70 years, but also the lightness of someone who has finally done the right thing. The next 2 days were the longest of my life, friend. 48 hours watching the lie that I had believed was family crumble over so many years. Officer Smith of the Georgia State Police stood on the main porch from 6 o'clock on the 15th morning, with his uniform ironed and his notebook where he noted every movement of the expelled, as if they were dangerous criminals. "Mr. Hansen," he told me, removing his cap respectfully, "I'm very sorry you have to go through this, but the law is clear. They have until Friday at 6 o'clock in the afternoon to fully vacate." Angelica appeared mid-morning with her eyes swollen from crying, but I already knew the difference between tears of pain and tears of spite. She dragged a large blue cloth suitcase, the one we had bought for their honeymoon in San Diego, and moved through the house like a thief collecting everything she could carry, without it seeming like outright theft. I saw her put the jewelry I had given her for her birthday into her suitcase. Silver earrings with obsidian that cost $3,000, and Constance's silk shawl that I gave her on her wedding day. Every object she took was like a stab, but her small betrayals no longer hurt me. The great pain had killed all the small pains. "Uncle," she said when she found me in the kitchen preparing my morning coffee, "you know I loved you like a father, right? All this just got out of control." "What I know, dear," I replied without turning to look at her, concentrating on pouring the coffee as my grandfather had taught me, "is that a daughter does not plan to put her father in an assisted living facility to steal his inheritance." She was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. She was no longer the sweet niece-in-law begging for forgiveness. She was the viper showing her fangs. "You are going to regret this. Without us, this estate is going to fall apart. Those Hicks don't know how to run a business." "Those Hicks," I said, turning to look her directly in the eyes, "have been running this estate for 40 years while you learned how to put on makeup. They know more about coffee on their pinky finger than you do in your whole life." She stormed out of the kitchen, and that was the last conversation we had. An hour later, I heard the engine of the Greyhound bus braking on the main road. From my bedroom window, I saw her run up with her suitcase and 2 plastic bags, without turning to say goodbye, without even feigning sadness. The 12:30 bus that goes direct to New York City, $800 for the first-class ticket that she surely paid for, with money she had stolen from our accounts. The diesel engine roared, taking away the woman I thought was my daughter, and I felt as if a thorn that had been stuck in my heart for months had been removed. Paul was different, friend. He stayed until the last moment, packing his things with the trembling hands of someone who cannot believe what they are experiencing. I found him in his room, the one that had been Constance's sewing room, putting clothes into cardboard boxes he had gotten from Mr. Clark's store. "Uncle," he said when he saw me at the door, and his voice sounded like the 25-year-old boy who had arrived crying after the flood. "I know I can't be forgiven, but I want you to know that you saved my life when I lost my parents. I will never forget that." "I won't forget it either, son," I replied, and the words cost me as if my throat were full of sand. "That's why what you did hurts so much." He sat on the edge of the bed where he had slept for 3 years, with a photograph of his parents in his hands. "Where am I going to go, Uncle? I don't have money, I don't have a job, I don't have family." "Family is earned with loyalty, boy. It is not inherited with blood. And work, well, you have hands and you have a head. Use them for good this time." On Friday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Mr. Johnson arrived with his pickup truck to take Paul away. The workers had decided among themselves to help him get a job at another plantation, because despite everything, they knew that he had been a victim of Angelica's manipulations as much as I had. "Boss," Mr. Johnson told me, "the boy can work at the Hope with Mr. Thomas. He won't earn much, $4,000 a month to start, but he will have a roof and food." I watched Paul get into the truck with his 4 boxes of belongings, everything he had left of his life after losing family, wife, and future. He cried when the engine started. He cried like a lost child. And a part of my heart broke again, seeing the boy I once loved as a son turned into a stranger, paying for his betrayals. The truck drove away on the gravel road, raising red dust that shone in the sunset, and I remained standing on the main porch, feeling that strange mixture of sadness and relief that comes when you finally cut out an infected wound. The following months brought me news that confirmed I had made the right decisions. In May, Mr. Clark told me that Angelica had disappeared from the States without a trace. "They say she took her American lover's savings," he informed me while we drank coffee in his store. "The guy is looking for her everywhere, but she vanished like smoke." By August, I learned that Attorney Miller, the lawyer who had helped plan my ruin, had been stripped of his professional license by the Georgia Bar Association. "Multiple complaints of fraud and malpractice," Attorney Green explained to me when he came to check the foundation papers. His career ended just like his criminal plans. But the news that filled my heart the most came from the success of my decisions. The workers' cooperative transformed the estate into something more beautiful than I had dreamed. Under Mr. Johnson's direction, and with advice from agricultural engineers from the university, we converted the entire plantation to certified organic farming. "Mr. Hansen," Mr. Johnson explained to me one afternoon as we walked among the coffee groves that now shone with the pride of shared ownership, "organic coffee sells for $60 a pound in the European market, double what we got before." The 15 families worked with new energy, knowing that every bean they harvested belonged to them. They built a modern processing center with German pulping machines, stainless steel fermentation tanks, and drying patios with specialized netting. The investment was $2 million, but in the first year, they were already exporting directly to Germany, France, and Sweden. $5 million in net profit, the accountant I hired to supervise the cooperative accounts informed me. And that's just the first year. When we have the brand fully established in Europe, we could reach $8 million annually. The Constance Hansen Educational Foundation grew like a tree planted in fertile ground. With the export income, we built the first school in Atlanta County. A beautiful 2-story building with large classrooms, a library, a computer lab, and a cafeteria where children receive free breakfast and lunch. 300 children, Mr. Hansen. Professor Davis, the director, would tell me every time I visited the schools. Children who used to walk 3 miles to get to a school without a roof now have first-quality education 10 minutes from their homes. We built the second school in Savannah and the third in Macon. Each one cost $800,000, but every dollar was saving the future of children who would have grown up without opportunities, condemned to repeat their parents' poverty. By December of the first year, a reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution came to do an article about what he called the San Robert Estate Miracle. The newspaper published the complete story on the front page with the headline that made me famous throughout Georgia. "The planter who gave everything to his workers." Mr. Robert Hansen, the journalist wrote, has become a symbol of social justice. In an era where the rich only think about getting richer, his decision to turn his family betrayal into a community triumph demonstrates that true nobility is not inherited, it is earned. The article attracted national attention. Reporters came from CNN, from Fox News, from newspapers in New York and Chicago. Everyone wanted to meet the generous planter who had preferred to enrich his workers rather than leave his fortune to the traitorous family. But of all the news I received that year, the one that moved me the most arrived exactly a year after Valentine's Day night. A letter with a Memphis postmark, written in Paul's shaky handwriting. Uncle Robert, today is February 14th again, and I can't let this day pass without writing to you. I have worked all year at the Hope, earning $4,000 a month, living in an adobe room I share with 2 other workers. I sleep on a mat on the dirt floor, like when I was a child and my parents were still alive. I am not writing to ask for your forgiveness, because I know I don't deserve it. I am writing to tell you that you were right about everything. During these months, I have understood what it means to work the earth with your hands, to earn your bread with your sweat, to sleep with a clear conscience because you haven't betrayed anyone. Angelica poisoned my heart with dreams of easy wealth, but the fault was mine for letting the poison in. You raised me better. You taught me better values, but I preferred to listen to greed rather than gratitude. I don't ask you to forgive me. I only ask you to understand that the boy you raised with so much love is still alive inside here, buried under months of regret, but alive at last. Someday, perhaps in many years, I hope to be worthy again of the affection you gave me. I kept that letter in the wooden box where Constance kept her most precious memories, next to the dried flowers from her wedding bouquet and the letters I wrote her when we were dating. I didn't reply, because there are pardons that need time to ripen like coffee on the plant. But the letter gave me a peace I hadn't felt since the day of the betrayal. My new life with Mr. Johnson in the main house became the quietest period of my 70 years. Every morning, we get up to the rooster crowing, prepare coffee in the large kitchen that Constance's laughter once filled with aromas, and go out to walk through the coffee groves that now belong to those who work them. Mr. Hanson, Mr. Johnson says to me as we watch the workers harvest the ripe beans, don't you ever regret what you did? You could have been the richest man in Georgia. John, I reply, looking at the mountains that rise like green giants under God's blue sky. I already was the richest man in Georgia. I just didn't know where my riches were hidden. Agronomy students come every semester to do internships at the cooperative. 20-year-old boys, full of modern theories and dreams of changing the world, who learn the ancient secrets of coffee from us, while we learn the new techniques of science from them. Professor Hanson, they call me now. How did you know the cooperative would work better than the boss system? Kids, I explain, as I teach them to distinguish the ripe bean by its perfect cherry color. When a man works his own land, he puts a piece of his soul into every bean. When he works someone else's land, he only puts his hands. In the afternoons, I sit on the main porch with Mr. Johnson, drinking coffee that we ourselves cultivated, roasted, and ground. Watching the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky with colors that change every day, but are always perfect. You know what, John? I say to him as we listen to the children play in the courtyard where they once hung the banner of my forced retirement. It turns out that sign was right. I did retire that night. How so, boss? I retired from resentment, from bitterness, from carrying the weight of others' betrayals. I retired from the toxic family that was killing me inside. It was the best retirement of my life. Friend, if those you love most ever betray you, if you ever discover that the people you trusted the most have been planning your destruction, I want you to remember my story. Hot revenge burns the avenger as much as the traitor. But cold justice builds something beautiful on the ashes of betrayal. Dignity is worth more than blood. Loyalty is earned, not inherited. And sometimes, to find your true family, you have to say goodbye to the false family that destiny gave you. That February night, when I heard their plans in my own study, I thought my life was over. But it turns out that the most beautiful part was just beginning. The part where I finally learned the difference between having relatives and having family.